Good morning, my friends. Previously, I have discussed with you about the pattern of study in modern history. Because you know that the old-fashioned pattern is not applicable in today's examination system. In present examination system, you will find that the questions are going to be more and more applied in nature. Apart from that, whenever you are going through the subject, this is a very challenging question before you to how to assimilate the things within the stipulated time. I have told you you are moving from chapter to chapter. For example, you have just opened the chapter. The first chapter you can find in modern history part, the decline of Mughal Empire. Then you will move to the other chapter. Then the foundation of the British rule or the conversion of the British company from a mercantile power to a political power. Then the Battle of Carnatic or the battles of Carnatic or Carnatic War. Then you are moving to the Battle of Palasi, that of Buxar. Then you know Treaty of Allahabad, etc., etc. Then you are moving to the different viceroys, their policies. Then even some economic policies. Sometime you are moving to other topic like administrative reforms, permanent settlement, Retwari system, Mahalwari system. Then the next one topic you can deal with uh, about the Wellesley, the subsidiary alliance. Then Lord Dalhousie, the policy of doctrine of lapse, the policy of annexation, etc., etc. So whenever you are moving from one topic to other topic, in the mid of the course or in the mid of the topic, you will come to realize what you have just assimilated. So they have simply evaporated, and today your mind is completely blank. So this situation is very common in preparation of civil services, and particularly whenever you will deal with the questions are going to be more and more applied. Normally they will not ask you the question directly. The question nature of the question would be completely indirect or inference here. You have to answer the question while taking inference from different books, different source of knowledge, etc. So that's why I have given to you some method, a specific method. And the method is we have to divide modern history in 4 different parts. The first part is associated with the part of 18th century, the history of 18th century. The second one part is the history of colonialism. The third part, the history of nationalism. And the fourth part, that is the contemporary history or contemporary modern history, you can say. Now we are moving to the first one part. So that is the history of 18th century, which I have just told you earlier. But whenever you will observe, you will find even the history of 18th century should be divided into subparts. Two subparts. The first subpart is the decline of Mughal Empire, and the second one part is the foundation of the British rule. My students, today I will simply deal with the first one part. In the rest of the classes, I will deal with the second one part, the third one part, the fourth one part. Here my objective is not to make you completely, you can say, proficient in the subject or to make you develop the complete expertise in the subject, simply to give you certain and fundamental ideas how to deal with the topic and how to make preparation and study in the subject. Up here you can say, first take the first part, the history of 18th century. This part is important for you from GS and optional, both the points of view. In GS mains you will find certain questions, even in GS prelims you will find the questions, as today prelims does not exist in the optional part, so prelims exist in the GS part. You can find that some questions from this side. In optional part, wherever you will recall or go through the pages of your question paper, you will come to realize in 2014 and 2017, twice they have placed the question from this area, the history of 18th century and particularly the decline of Mughal Empire side. For example, in 2014 they have asked you the question, why did all earth moving battles occur in the Panipat alone? Why did such battles just take place in Panipat alone? And then they have just tried to link the second one part, underline the significance of the third battle of Panipat. Up here the students were going to be a bit perturbed, particularly when they are coming from non-history background. They we are unable to find out what was the reason behind that, because the questions are going to be inferential, so that not simply require your flat thinking but critical thinking. Critical thinking means you have to view over the question, what can be the reason, what can be the reason, and then just you will open the antenna of your mind, and antenna will take the wave from somewhere. In this question you will take the wave from the Mughal defense line. You might have heard about the Kabul, Ghazni and Kandahar defense line of Mughals, and that was situated in western part, or moving from Central Asia to West Asia. So far as the Mughals were having the control over this defense line, no foreign intruders could dare to move towards India. But once they lost this line, then the river Indus is the second defense line. They were moving further, Lahore, Multan and Dipalpur, that is the third defense line. And if some intruders or the invading army crosses even the third one line, so then he crosses, they crossed Punjab, and then after crossing Punjab, they had to move through the vast land of Haryana, and then they could easily reach up to the gateway to Delhi. Panipat was the gateway to Delhi. So naturally they would move towards Delhi, and then you can say that the Delhi-based power was going to be desperate, because they were on the point of, or on the verge of losing everything. So they have to give a final and daunting fight in the Panipat. And so that is favorable to both the parties. Okay, this is the one way. Now, in 2017, they have placed another question in GS paper. This was, how did the decline of Mughal Empire could give birth to the divided sovereignty or truncated sovereignty, whatever you may call. If this question was going to be straight, you have to simply reflect, and you have to simply write about the political fragmentation of India, what was the condition of successor states, the rebel states, etc. after the decline of Mughal Empire, or what was the political scenario of India. So you will just write it. But in the questions directly you will not find any demand for the future trend. But I will give you the suggestion here. Here you have to take some initiative, although in the question they have simply inquired about the political disintegration of the Mughal Empire. But at your own, you have to give certain hint. How did this political fragmentation encourage the British to inculcate and to promote their political ambition in India? How did it prepare the way for the rise of British as a political power in India? So you have to simply give a hint, because the size of the question is 150 words, so you are not having the much scope to write, but within the precisely you can mention this point as well. Now my students, just observe the history of 18th century, the first half, the disintegration of Mughal Empire, and the second part is the foundation of British rule in India. How was a British mercantile company transformed into a political power in India? So that is the subject of the second one part. My student, this part is, you can say, smaller in size. You are simply supposed to observe the polity of India, starting from the first half of 18th century, and then you have to end up to the Battle of Buxar, as well as the Treaty of Allahabad in 1765. So that's over. In first half of 18th century, you have to be familiar with the events, what was the political scenario of India, which were the successor states, who were the important rulers, what were their policies, starting from North India to Mysore, means from Hyder Ali to Tipu Sultan. But here simply we just observe the political scenario of India. Then you are moving toward the economic condition as well. But my students, here I will give you the suggestion so far as you will not acquire the basic knowledge about historiography, so you will not do justice to many questions. For example, if there is some debate between the two group of scholars, British imperialist scholars preferably characterize this period as the Dark Age, because the use of the term Dark Age was beneficial for them, because once they was able to prove this period as the Dark Age, so it means it was easy for them to prove the second half of 18th century, means the foundation of British rule, as the age of light, or you can say as progressive age. So that's why it was characterized as the Dark Age, and political fragmentation of India was overemphasized. Likewise, they tried to prove that it was the age of acute economic crisis for the Mughal Empire and also for India. But my students, in the light of new historiography, this view has been counterbalanced, and some new scholars jumped into the fray. You may have heard the name Muzaffar Alam, Chetan Singh, Sanjay Subramaniam, uh, Karen Leonard, etc., etc. So a number of scholars just joined the debate, and they tried to prove that it was no more the case of political fragmentation. Even Satish Chandra had changed the party. Earlier he was talking about the crisis under the Mughal Empire, but later he just presented a new view. This era was imbued with new possibilities. So in this way, you can say the second one group of historians have tried to prove that no, it should not be characterized as the age of political fragmentation or the age of political decline, as the successor states and some other states like Mysore could give the very competent governance in their respective areas. So some sort of political, you can say, strength could have been maintained by the successor states. So this period is no more be characterized as the age of decline. Then we are moving to the economic issues. These scholars try to prove that why was this period treated as the age of economic crisis? How can you forget the point that this was the time that there was the influx of precious metal from American continent via Europe to India, and from all over the world the precious metal were just, you can say, fastly running towards India. This was the one factor. Second one factor, a number of cash crops were introduced in India, and they led to the monetization of economy, monetization of agriculture. So how can we call it the age of decline? So now, my students, in the light of new historiography, you have to keep this thing in your view. You can ask me the question, how can we use this data in the answer? It depends over the question. You should try to identify the basic demand of the question. For example, in UPSC, they have asked you the question in GS paper in 2017. How did the decline of Mughal Empire result into political fragmentation or political division? They have asked the question. Suppose they could have just changed the question. Do you agree with the view that the disintegration of Mughal Empire just result into political fragmentation and decline in India? So then you have to get a hint. You have to hear the sound from the question. We have to disagree with the view in the light of new historiography. So be clear, be confident. It is the question itself which is giving you the guideline in which way you are supposed to move. Then you are coming to the second half of the 18th century. So obviously, you have just brought certain changes in the historical paradigm in the first half. So naturally, you are supposed to make a change in the second half as well. The second half, the important issue is a British apologist historian, his name is Sarjana Sarkar. So he tried to establish that with the battle of Plassey, medieval age ended and modern age started in India. Now the question arises, should we agree with this view? Obviously, you can say either the British modernized India or colonized India. We cannot say that the British modernized India after the Battle of Plassey. So actually, we have to understand here the true nature of modernization. So this is another thing, but at this point, we have to discuss one, and we have to focus over the one important aspect, and that is after the Battle of Plassey, for the rest 40 and 50 years, the British blindly carried the wealth from Bengal and from India to Europe, to Britain, and there was the profuse drain of wealth from India. It led to the impoverishment of Bengal and impoverishment of India. But at the same time, the British didn't take any specific interest either in administrative reforms or the socio-cultural reforms in India. And if the socio-cultural reforms are not being carried on, how can you characterize this period as the era of modernization? So here the view of Sarjana Sarkar should be countered. Obviously, British brought certain changes in from early 19th century onwards, and due to some exterior reason, which I have to discuss with you in the topic like colonialism. Then the second one historiographical issue is about the Battle of Plassey and that of Buxar, because some Bengali scholars have particularly emphasized the point With the Battle of Plassey, when the British, when you can say the Nawab of Bengal lost the Battle of Plassey, so there started an era of eternal darkness in India. Eternal darkness means, Shashwat in Hindi that is called, forever. But here some other scholars countered the view that actually here the scholars are being guided by Bengali sub-nationalism because they are having the Bengal centric view. So just the defeat of a Nawab of Bengal was overestimated in context of Indian politics. So now it is believed that it has completely transformed India into the dark age. So some way they are having the Bengali centric view. So these scholars have even drew the attention ki so far as the question of the Battle of Plassey is concerned, it is not so much significant as the Battle of Buxar later, and they have given the view ki in fact after the Battle of Plassey the British could have lost even a single battle. So then whatever gains and whatever achievement the British took in the Battle of Plassey, so they were naturally supposed to lose all the benefits after losing any war after the Battle of Plassey. So that's why the Battle of Buxar should be taken more significant battle than the Battle of Plassey. Now what will you do in type of the question? They will just give you the same question because in optional paper in 2014 they have just given the same statement which I am just discussing with you. Then what should your stand? So actually here you are supposed to take a balanced view between the two extremes. What is the balanced view? You will just keep this point. You have just placed your point of view in the manner. It is true that Battle of Buxar is more significant because it was decisive, much more decisive than the Battle of Plassey. It is true, but it is equally true if the British could win the Battle of Buxar so easily and against the combined power of India, so it could not have been otherwise possible till the British could have exploited the resources of Bengal for the continuous 7 years. So in fact, Battle of Plassey gave them the opportunity and placed at their disposal the most prosperous province, which was Bengal, and that is, you can say, enabled the British to win the Battle of Buxar so easily. So the Battle of Plassey and that of Buxar should not be taken separately, rather they should have been taken in continuation. So that would have been a better and more balanced approach in the question. So my students, in the Battle of Buxar and in the story of Bengal, you will just observe the events from the Carnatic War and 3 battles in Carnatic War. Then you will move toward the Battle of Plassey and Buxar and how the political vacuum was created there. So British benefited from there. One important thing is that between the Battle of Plassey and Battle of Buxar, one more and much more significant battle has taken place. But sometime the people are going to ignore this battle. You might have heard about the 3rd Battle of Panipat. So this 3rd Battle of Panipat, which occurred in 1761, so that is lying something between the Battle of Plassey and the Battle of Buxar. Can you imagine that the British could have boldly taken such a strong step against the Mughal emperor at that time in 1764 if the Maratha could have been, you can say, powerful and active, and if they could not have lost the 3rd Battle of Panipat. So the Marathas brigades army or soldiers might have moving nearby region of Delhi. Was it possible for Delhi to have the dominance over the, possible for the British to have the dominance over Delhi and emperor if the Marathas could have been active? But normally in course of study we are going to undermine this thing. So this part is the very, you can say, a smaller part, and you can very well do justice to the part. Firstly, observe changes, how the first half of 18th century, second half of 18th century, then gain the knowledge of historiography. So this part is not difficult for you, rather you can say easy for you. I'll just discuss this aspect later. The part 2, colonialism, is definitely a larger part, then nationalism is the further larger, and post-independence era is much interesting for you. I'll continue my discussion till I'll finish all the 4 parts. Thank you very much, and I'll see you later.